Welcome to the Family Show. I'm your host, Eleanor Rossman, and joining me today and every week are Brenda and Randy Lee. Nice to see you both in studio.
It's good to see you again.
Nice to be here.
You know, we're going to talk about, this sounds a little funny, but love and warfare in the same sense.
Funny as in odd, no doubt, right?
Yeah.
Well, I was listening to Joyce Meyer the other day, and Joyce made what I thought was a very provocative observation. She said, love is the highest form of spiritual warfare, right? Mm-hmm. Love is the highest form of spiritual warfare. And essential to that statement are 2 points. First is we are in a war, and that war is in the spiritual realm. Mm-hmm. And at least for me, on a day-to-day basis, I don't think I appreciate that. You know, and you go through the Bible, and there's constantly warfare in the Bible, in the spiritual realm, between God and Satan. And
well, don't we say we living on earth are the church militant?
Great phrase. Exactly. What does it mean to be the church militant, right? And when you are in a war, like a fruit of that dynamic, when you are in a war, right, wars should get people's attention, right? Because wars do violence. Mm-hmm. You know, you're in a war, you build shelters in war, you post sentries in war, you build barricades, you try and protect yourself, right?
Right.
And wars also get people's attention because wars have consequences, right? If you do not win the war, you will definitely lose something. Depending on the war, what you lose changes, but you will definitely lose something, right? So the first point, we start out, we're in a war in the spiritual realm. The second point of the statement is that this war, in this war, the most powerful weapon we have is love, right?
Yeah.
Now, if you think about it, when you're in a war, you recruit
other soldiers.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You recruit soldiers. But now this is a tricky part. Once you recruit your soldiers, you don't just get them and send them into war, right? Before you send them into the war, you need to what?
Train them.
Exactly. You need to train them.
It's always a test on this program.
Exactly.
I just let you answer all the questions. I don't want to be wrong.
So we got this training, and one of the most important lessons you train your soldiers on is their weapon, right?
Yeah.
And not just how to fire the weapon, but how to maintain it, how to clean it, how to fix it, how to load it. The soldier needs to know everything about his weapon because it will keep him alive, and he cannot win the war without it. Mm-hmm. So we're in this war, this spiritual war. Our weapon is love. How well do we know our weapon? Right? Love is our weapon. How well do we know it? And I would argue that we live in a world that doesn't want us to understand our weapon at all. Mm-hmm. Okay? So now think about this. In our culture, we use the same word to describe our relationship with our God, our spouse, and our ice cream.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Do we really?
Sometimes in that order.
Or the ice cream comes first, right? Do we really have the same relationship with ice cream or coffee as we have with our spouse or our God? And I know some people are saying, well, actually, Randy, yeah, I do, right? I need God and I need coffee, or ice cream really makes me happy, or coffee really makes me, and my spouse makes me really happy, so that's why I love them both, right? And that is exactly my point. When we have to wrap the same word around these two very different relationships, the word loses its meaning.
Yeah.
Right? We don't love something simply because we need it or we want it or it makes it happy, at least in our spiritual realm war, right? Let's look at these two relationships, right? You're really in the mood for ice cream, right? Brenda, you're like coffee, peanut butter, ice cream kind of person.
Coffee. Yeah.
Okay.
Too.
So coffee is a good choice, right? So you're really in the mood for coffee ice cream. Right? You go to the freezer, you open the freezer door, you see the carton of coffee ice cream, right? You have a carton of ice cream. You're really craving the ice cream. You take the carton out of the freezer, You get your spoon, you get your bowl, you lift open the lid of the carton, and you see that the ice cream has freezer burn, right? Mm-hmm. It has that right, solid, frozen, molten milk look, right? The ice crystals are all over it, right? So what do? Right? That flavor of ice cream still makes you happy. You still want ice cream, but your ice cream has freezer burn. Mm-hmm. What do?
You scrape the top of that freezer burn.
That's what you start out with, right? You start scraping it around, digging around, trying to see if there's something in the carton that really works.
Salvageable.
Salvageable, exactly. But after a while, right, you see that you can't salvage the ice cream, right? So you ultimately throw it out, right? So what do you do with your spouse when you see your spouse has freezer burn, right? What do you do with your God when you see your God has freezer burn? Very different relationships, right? I was watching the news the other night, right? And they had a story about this guy. He's in his 80s. I think he was in his 80s. His wife was probably late stages Alzheimer's. She's in a care facility an hour, 2 hours away from where he lives, right? So it's COVID, but still 2-3 times a week, he's driving to the care facility she's in, right? 2-3 hours round trip to see her through a window because it's COVID, right? He can't go in, right? She's inside, he's outside, it's winter. He's staring at her through this window, waving, talking. Maybe she still recognizes him, but maybe she doesn't, right? He doesn't even know, right? Doesn't matter whether she can recognize him, right? He still recognizes her. Mm-hmm. Finally, this spring, the nursing home opens up again, right? First in-person visit in over a year. He shows up, of course, on the first day, right? They let him in, and he's literally, the camera's running, he's literally jumping back and forth, foot to foot, as they're bringing her down to see him, right? Mm-hmm. He's so excited. They wheel her in. He sits down next to her. He sings to her the whole time. She can't speak. She can't sing along. After the visit's over, the anchor person or the reporter, whatever, asks him, "Did she recognize you?" And his response was, "I don't know, but she held my hand for the whole hour." Oh. Right? Mm-hmm. And she seemed to respond to some of the songs that I was singing. Couldn't sing along, but she seemed to respond to some of the songs that I was singing. Right? So you say, well, Randy, that's love because she still made him happy. And my response is, no, it's love because it's bigger than the freezer burn, right? Love is not the fruit of happy feelings. I'm in love because she still makes me happy. I experience that joy, right? That happiness, that fulfillment because I love.
Yeah, I think we almost need to be, immersed in lessons in love again, because we do get washed out with every commercial. You love it. You love everything, but I've noticed during COVID, there were so many instances, if you could catch them, of people getting out of their own distress and anxiety and doing something for somebody else, and true acts of love. And I think we have to see examples of love again for us to say, yeah, that is true love. And, I saw it again and again, whether it was like, you know what, today I'm going to go down and pack food for families who don't have it. Today I'm going to, and it's just like.
It seems like it's another analogy would be it's a muscle that needs to be exercised on a regular basis.
But we need
there'll be
to,
atrophy.
And we need to, I always say, I wish you would see more of that on the news instead of, what we are seeing all the time. And it's, it just would stick more. Maybe we would go out and say, I want to be that. That's genuine.
And I think you both are like just right on the money. And the reason I say that is because we function in a culture where we think that intuitively we know how to love. We think it's this natural thing. It just happens. And you don't have to develop it. You don't have to nurture it. You don't have to exercise it. In fact, you don't even need to know what it is. It will just happen. And I think the reality is we actually need to know what the point B of loving is. And then we do need to consciously exercise it and pursue it on a regular basis.
Yeah.
It is conquering, and I ponder a lot when, in the gospel, it's faith, hope, and love, but the greatest of these is love. He didn't say that lightly.
Right.
We all know that verse. And I always think, but there's a reason for that, because it can conquer everything.
And it's really more of a verb than a noun, the way we're discussing it. It's not something that it's something we do. Well, we can act on.
I think that's exactly right. That is exactly right. Love is very, very active, and we've made it a very passive thing. You think of the Ten Commandments, and maybe we can talk about that after the break, but you think about the Ten Commandments, and the Ten Commandments, 9 of the 10 Commandments are not.
Yeah.
Don't do this, don't do that, don't do that. And one of the incredible things is both Jesus and God, when they're trying to get the law in a nutshell, they say, don't worry about what you shouldn't do. Focus on what you should do. And what you should do is love.
Yeah.
Right? If you love, all of the things you shouldn't do will be crowded out and you won't have to worry about.
Won't be an issue. Remember, with the greatest of these, love God and love your neighbor as yourself.
Exactly.
And then you don't have to get caught up in the other stuff because you don't steal from somebody you love. You don't lie to somebody that you love.
And you're so busy loving them that there's no time to do that other stuff.
Yeah. We're going to stop for a break very quickly. You are listening to In the News. No, you're not. You're listening to The Family Show on Holy Family Radio. That's what happens when you have 2 shows. We'll be back in just a minute. We are back with The Family Show with Brenda and Randy Lee, and we're talking about loving and how loving is different than like your love of ice cream.
That is exactly what we've been talking about. Exciting. And one of the other differences, right? So the first difference we talked about was that loving a person, you don't discard the person because they have freezer burn. You discard ice cream because it has freezer burn, right? Right. But there's, and I think that kind of leads very naturally into the second big difference. You don't think of ice cream as being tough, right? But love is tough. There's this tenacity, this perseverance in love. And because we're after Easter and before Pentecost, it's, I've been sort of flipping through Acts of the Apostles. And that is an incredibly redundant book, right? And they could have shaved, that book could be like 4 chapters. Because what keeps happening is Peter and Paul, especially Paul, keep telling the same story over and over and over again. It's like, and that's intentional. And it came at a price because that's before word processing. So you couldn't just copy and paste, copy and paste, copy and paste. Peter's saying the same thing again. Paul's saying the same thing. Just copy and paste, drop it in. No, some poor scrivener somewhere is having to recopy this story 60 times every time he does the book. So, I'm thinking to myself, why did they do this, right? And the amazing thing is every time Paul tells the story, right? He goes in the synagogue, he tells a story, this is what happened to me, this is what happened in the history of the Jews, and this is why this fulfillment of the, it's exactly the same story every single time. And every single time he tells it, they drag him out of the synagogue and they just beat the bejeebers out of it, right? It keeps happening.
Yeah. And
that's why, right? That's why they keep repeating it, is they want you to understand that Paul tells his story. They pound him with this consequence, and he comes back and he tells the same story without changing a word. They just can't get this guy to stop living out the call of love that God has put on his life.
Back to the ice cream. It seems like our culture in this day and age really would say, get rid of that freezer burn ice cream like you would get rid of a spouse that you don't want to dig any deeper, right? That there is no difference. As long as you're happy and you're feeling it, stay with it. But the minute it gets difficult, the minute it takes tenacity and diligence and effort,
throw it out.
Yeah.
Well, I watch, and Brenda's mom, she moved out to New Jersey, and she's in a...
she moved from New Jersey.
She moved from New Jersey out here, right? And she's in a residential care, and she has memory issues, right? And I'm seeing Bren get ready to visit her mom. I'm watching Bren get ready to visit her mom. And she had the experience when your brother and your sister, right? It was like the day after you went to visit, right? And so...
Oh, yeah. Well, she's, has the memory issue. So you go, and I usually bring my grandson and my daughter, and we bring pictures, we bring, you name it, just to have that experience with her. And, we bring candy and cards and,
ice cream.
Yeah, that's coming. So it's so funny. And you set up this perfect visit, and then, have a great time, spend our time. And then the very next day, my sister went and my brother, and I said, what'd she think of my visit? And they're like, oh, she said you didn't come. So,
oh, that's tough.
And it's so crazy. But instead of getting deflated, I think, but we did have a great time. Like, she's very good while you're there. She can respond. But then it's gone.
Retain it, yeah.
It's gone. So you just have to go in with, for this moment, it's going to be a great time. Yeah. And you're still going to, prepare and do your,
And that's incredible. I mean, I look at that, and I could be saying, Brenda's like, should I bring her pizza? Should I, I'm kind of like, well, what does it matter? She's going to forget in 2 hours anyway, right? And you can say 2 hours after you leave, she won't remember you were there. But what love says is that in the 2 hours I was there, it will matter that I came. Right? Love has that, it doesn't get discouraged.
No.
Right?
And I also think you can bank it. You know what I mean? It's like, it's not lost. It's not it's not a wasted effort.
No.
Not that we're trying to just, kind of make our mansion in heaven. I mean, that's all God's plan. But to know that what efforts are lasting? What do we do that really lasts? Love never dies, right?
Right.
Well, and I think that dynamic of banking it up, or love is a relationship we have with God, and we can experience the fulfillment of God here when we love, right? And we need to think of this as relationship manifestation of our relationship with our beloved. And I think another big difference between loving God or your spouse and loving ice cream, not to pick on ice cream, but have you ever noticed anyone studying the ingredients, the nutrition statement on the side of the carton of ice cream in the frozen food aisle? Yeah. Right? I can't wait to get home and look at this. I got to look at this here. I got to see those ingredients, right? No one wants to know what's in ice cream. Let me read about all your grams of fat and corn syrup and salt and sugar and artificial vanilla, right? People, do we want to study or understand the depths of ice cream? Or do people just want to look at the
Just
picture on the
give me a
card?
spoon.
Exactly. Just grab me the spoon. Right? But we should want to know the depth of our beloved, right? One of my favorite Bible moments, right? We're in the book of Ezra, and the Jews in Judah have turned away from God. They've lost sight of Him, His law. They've lost their way. They get conquered by the Babylonians. Temple's destroyed. Jerusalem's destroyed. City is ransacked. The people are exiled. They're enslaved in Babylon. Finally, after decades and decades, a contingent of them are allowed to return to Jerusalem. And in the process of rebuilding the city, restoring this temple, they find a copy of the law. So one day they all take off work, they gather together for the reading of the law, and as they hear the law being read, they all begin to weep, right? 2 reasons. First, they realize how in that law God was trying to save them. Their beloved was trying to save them from themselves. And how if they just listened to God, they could have avoided so much pain. But they also weep because as they hear the law, they are encountering more deeply the wisdom of God, right? And the more deeply they encounter the wisdom of God, their beloved, the more beautiful they realize it is, right? Do we love God and our neighbor? Do we seek them? Do we seek them with our whole heart? Do we seek to see them and understand them fully? Do we study the beauty in God, right? And if not, is that because we are not seeking Him with our whole heart, right? Let's revisit what's happened to Mass in the last 2 years, right? First, there were these pressures not to do the sign of peace, because if you do the sign of peace, you're going to spread germs, right? Then there were these pressures to stop the sacred cup, right? Because it might spread germs, right? And then they told us to stop physically attending Mass, consuming the sacred host.
And let me just say before that, not that this is more important, but no holy water.
Exactly.
All the fonts were dry, right? Still are.
I can't encounter my beloved on a physical level. So here we are, and we're watching Mass on television.
Right.
While Jesus is locked alone in the tabernacle.
Yes.
How is that seeking my beloved with my whole heart? Right? And how much did we say, if you take this away from me, this will be lost. I will feel this, right? That wasn't my response, right? You know, as I said, you know, Christians get very caught up sometimes in the 10 Commandments, which is unfortunate because God gave the Jews a lot more than 10 directives. And also because God's directives get these labels, commandments, which is a big, scary, intimidating kind of word, which carries with it a sense of violence, force, intimidation. Nothing in that word makes you weep in awe or wonder or joy, right? And then in the midst of this, one of the commands is God's command to love with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, right? And that's an Old Testament thing, Deuteronomy 6:5. And thinking of that as a commandment, it seems like an oxymoron. I command you to give your love totally to me, right? It's like, Nell, if you won't marry me, I'll tie you to the railroad tracks, right? I don't think that's how the exiled Jews understood that when they heard it in Ezra. I think they heard the wisdom of God say, beloved, if you will surrender yourself to me as I have surrendered myself totally to you, if you will walk with me as I long to walk with you, if you will be intimate with me as I long to be intimate with you, then our love, our journey together will bring you to paradise. In God's universe, that's what commandment means. It doesn't mean I'm tying you to the railroad tracks. It means I'm carrying you to paradise. It's not a threat. It's not a command. It's not a promise. It's a promise. That's exactly right. I am the way. I am the truth, the light. I am the light to what? I am the way to what? Right? No one is coming to the Father except through me. I am the way to the Father. And the true paradise is with the Father. I am trying to get you to come with me because that is where you will experience joy and fulfillment.
Well, that's a good kind of warfare, right? Mm-hmm. We have to exercise.
Well, that's how you win. That's how you triumph.
How we win, right? By loving. We are out of time, but we invite you to join us every Friday at 12:30 on AM 720 for the Family Show. Make sure you go to our website at 720WHYF. Get your tickets for our event coming up on May 11th.
And keep our event.
Yes.
And us in your prayers.
For Brenda and Randy Lee, I'm Eleanor Rossman. We leave you with the beautiful sound of Season.